So this next presentation is going to focus on an evolving technology that is actually not currently approved for use in the UK, but our patient community know about it, and they're expressing great amounts of interest in finding out more. And for that reason, we have invited Dr. Young Hong to come here today for the first time to talk us through the findings from an international trial and indeed his experience of treating cholangiocarcinoma patients. And, you know, from our point of view, this is information we need to share. So I do invite Dr. Young Hong to come and talk to us about histotripsy for cholangiocarcinoma. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks for having me here from the US. It was actually pleasant hearing everyone with their lovely British accent all morning. It's very pleasant. I wanted to talk to you about histotripsy and what that is and why. I'm actually very excited about it. So just a little background about me. So I'm a surgeon, hepatobiliary surgeon, so I do pancreas, Whipple's, hypex for metastatic peritoneal cancers, but I also run the TIL therapy, so for melanoma, lung cancer, and head and neck. So I have a keen interest in immunotherapy during my time at the NIH with Steve Rosenberg. And then I also have a basic science lab in epigenetics for immunomodulation for ACC, PNET, and HIPEC models. So hepatobiliary immunotherapy interest with epigenetics. So the reason why I'm interested in all that is because I'm really passionate about immunotherapy and how to make that applicable for GI cancers. So these are my disclosures. This doesn't even come close to see how biased I am about histotripsy because I love this technology. So when I saw this technology 3 years ago, I fell in love with it. I begged and pleaded my CEO of the hospital for 3 years, and I threatened to leave the hospital unless they got it for me, so I finally got it. So just letting you know, I'm very in love with this technology, so I'm more in the hope side of this. So the talk is very simple. Simple surgeon, simple talk. So background on what histotripsy is, what the problem is that I first saw that this piece of technology fills, and how this could be a potential solution in an armamentarium of cholangiocarcinoma treatments. So just like Dr. Gomez and surgeons, we like videos. So I'm going to play a video. Can we play this video? Do I have to push? Yeah. So the histotripsy machine comes with an ultrasound machine that first uses a diagnostic component. This is a transducer that acts as a concentrating the ultrasound beam in a focal site through a water degassed solution. And in a non-invasive fashion, the ultrasound focused comes in that you can kind of map out yourself in real time on real-time ultrasound, target out exactly in a perfectly spherical fashion the treatment of interest. And this ultrasound, just like in 3D printing, will start treating the tumor in a complete circular fashion. It's an automated fashion. It's paired up with the GE Edison software. So basically, as a physician, you actually map out the treatment area, and then once you push go, the automated Edison software does this 3D filling of this microbubble ablation technology. The solution that results is a completely acellular lysate, and just kind of go in detail. So this is very misinformed notion. So whenever I said, hey, I'm doing histotripsy, everyone goes, oh, we do that. I was like, no, you don't. They have HIFU, which is a thermal ultrasound technology. So the difference is the pulses are low amplitude and longer waveforms, and that continues to build thermal buildup. Histotripsy is a mechanical disruption, which is a high amplitude with short pulses, and there is no heat that accumulates. So the key distinction that I fell in love with histotripsy is the non-thermal destruction of tumors. Not to mention the acellular lysate that results. So there's a couple things to show. So in this porcine liver model, there is a very precise dimensional dissolving of tumor into an acellular lysate. So all the cells are broken up and there's non-thermal destruction. Therefore, the peptides that were there, the neoantigens, are retained. Versus the thermal destruction, you have char of dead proteins that you can't really recognize. And you can zoom in and you can see the cellular level at which the ultrasound can cause a disruption of the tissue in a micron-specific specificity. You can literally go up to the gallbladder, up to a loop of jejunum and a hepatic OJ. I recently did that with the Roux-en-Y HJ, with the hilar cholangio recurrence, and you can literally map out the treatment right next to the bowel. And again, this is just to take home the point that there's nothing that remains in a post-histotripsy treated area. So a lot of suspicious skepticism about, well, maybe you're not completely treating it, but it's been proven time and time again that the area that the histotripsy, because of the mechanical cellular destruction that occurs, there's nothing but proteins, degraded proteins from the treatment. The size of the microbubbles is the size of a rice grain. So if you think of the way I like to explain it is to patients is like, when you have a magnifying lens in the sunny day, you kind of focus the sunlight and you can get the sunlight to a focal beam and try to burn leaves or something like that when you're little. Same thing with the ultrasound. You take the ultrasound transducer, which is a regular ultrasound probe. You have the transducer. You focus the ultrasound to a single point. That single point is the size of a rice grain. And that rice grain causes a cavitation where you have rapid expansion and collapse of a bubble cloud within the cell, and over 100 times a second. And so if you do that, you actually cause a shear force within the cell membrane that causes a mechanical destruction. So this is a picture of one of the histotripsy cases I did, and so you can literally see that red dot, the red grain that's going around is the actual treatment that's being delivered at the time. And this is the image view of the white enhancement is the actual energy beam being delivered. And the circle that you create is the actual treatment area that the treatment will fill in as a perfect sphere. You can measure in a three-dimensional fashion in an ultrasound and a coronal sagittal view of the lesions to make sure that you have every parts of the lesion. The beauty about that is you can actually visualize a tumor being dissolved before your eyes in real time. It's not like radiation where you have to kind of wait for 30-day scans to see whether there was an effect, chemotherapy, whether 3-month scan to see if there's an effect. This is immediate satisfaction that you are getting the lesion in question. If there's a question that there's residual disease after the end of this treatment, you can go back and just do the edges and do the residual tumor margin to make sure that you're happy with the post-ablation site. So in the US experience, the FDA approved this because of the results of the Hope for Liver trial. There was 44 patients that were treated, 42 of which had successful 95.5%. There was a minor complication unrelated to the histotripsy procedure itself, but cardiac issues related to the patient, not the treatment. The size were less than 3 centimeters and focused on ACC and liver metastasis from any histology. And that resulted in the US approving this in October 9th, 2023. And since then, people have an arms race of how to get this machine fast enough to this hospital. Thankfully, we were able to get this earlier than most. And so this is why I begged and pleaded my hospital to get this machine. So 3 years ago, I was sitting in back of a conference room, and my interest in GI, pancreas, immunotherapy, it works well for melanoma, it works well for lung cancer, why not for GI cancers? And it's just very perplexing. I try to look at epigenetic modulation, it's not really proving to be that as forward as I thought. And patients with cholangio, particularly the hilum, as Dr. Gomez alluded, is very heartbreaking. So the reason for that is, for the ones that is in the intrahepatic and the liver, yeah, you can resect the liver, easy. Pancreas, do the Whipple, easy. Mid-bile duct, great. But the hilum is very difficult because if you think about the hilum, it's a set of 3 Ys. So you have the bile duct bifurcation, the arterial bifurcation, and the vessel vein bifurcation. So they're all interconnected in that hilum. So when there's a cancer in the hilum, it generally also invades the vasculature, the artery particularly. And that makes it very difficult to resect, and often they present unresectable at baseline. We give them chemo, give them radiation in hopes to downsize it, but I rarely see that. And so it becomes a very problematic issue, and this is kind of where, when I saw histotripsy, it kind of fit where I was struggling to help these patients. And the reason for that is histotripsy does not injure the vessel or the bile duct because it's collagen-rich structure. So anything that's collagen-rich structure, like vasculature and biliary ducts, it does not injure. So you can take the histotripsy, that circle I just showed you, you put it right over the hilum, right over the portal vein, right over the hepatic artery, and it does not injure the vessels and does not cause bleeding. Furthermore, if you have a biliary obstruction, oftentimes the elevated bilirubin prevents patients from obtaining chemotherapy, right? So you have that as a limitation for why patients can't get treatment, is ultimately their bilies can't come down, and that's how they usually succumb to this disease. And so the histotripsy can also help provide decompression of patients who have no longer, who have exhausted their stent options from occlusion. Not to mention that the poor prognosis overall for cholangio, right? So chemotherapy has made some progress, and radiation has certainly helped the local control, but in terms of immunotherapy advancements, that's been really lackluster. So really, histotripsy, for the things that I mentioned with the vessel encasement and the biliary ductal involvement and the preservation of these structures in a post-histotripsy site, even on blood thinners. So patients are often on, warfarin or Lovenox for any AFib or any other DVTs or PEs, and we don't stop them. You don't stop their chemotherapy because you're not making an incision. So oftentimes the regimen that we do is when patients show for treatment, we say continue your blood thinners even to the day of surgery. Your chemotherapy, we usually during your off week. So you have your on week, the following week we have histotripsy, you go back to your chemotherapy the following week. And that has been a great advantage compared to surgery, which you have to hold a month in advance and a month after, maybe 2 if you don't have complications. Y90, certainly you would also be worried about liver toxicity, so you would also hold chemo. So a lot of these other treatments for cholangio, you kind of have to argue about what do you give up in return for the treatment I want to offer you. And oftentimes you have to trade one for the other. Histotripsy is different in that you can actually just add to it. So I call it chemo plus, radiation plus. And so patients really appreciate that they don't have to make this hard decision of I have to trade my chemo for this new treatment. They actually feel comforted that I can continue my treatment and this could only help me in the process. And this is just another porcine model that demonstrates the intact vasculature and the biliary ductal system. And again, I was kind of timid to do this initially when I first got the machine, but now that I got more comfortable, I point blank straight right at the hilum and blast that thing with energy, and I've been very pleased that the biliary system and the vasculature are not injured. as claimed. The other thing about cholangio and pancreatic cancer, high desmoplastic FGF receptor, heavy desmoplasia fibrosis causes a lot of chemotherapy penetrance issues. And the histotripsy has also shown increase in penetration of chemotherapy agents into the tumor, and that's a very important adjunct, let's say, to chemotherapy. So if you have a resistant to chemotherapy regimen, histotripsy in conjunction to that regimen could also show increase of tissue penetration. This is a paper by Cliff Cho out of Michigan. And so this is more looking at, okay, so histotripsy so far it's good because you don't make an incision, so that's a good marketing gig. You can ablate tumor, great. But really, the part that really is exciting is what I mentioned, the vasculature preservation, biliary preservation, and combined with chemotherapy. But for me, the part that got me really excited 3 years ago was this. So histotripsy is a non-thermal destruction of tumor. If you do radiation or do microwave, the neoantigen preservation is limited versus a mechanical destruction of a tumor lysate. Now the body takes that acellular lysate and goes through a process of autophagy, where the macrophages comes in and digest, and T-cell surveillance and release of damage-associated molecular patterns. And there's increased cytokine release in the tissue and the surrounding blood tumor microenvironment. And this is a proof of concept that basically if you see the treatment control treated area and there's an increased immune infiltration in the treated tumor, but in the untreated tumor, there's also increased infiltration of immune cells, and it has an abscopal effect. And this is just another more in-depth immunohistochemistry proof that there's co-localization of damage-associated molecular patterns. There's these ferroptosis that occurs with the lipid peroxidation of the destruction of the cell membrane and increased CD8 infiltration. So for me, who's interested in TIL therapy, which is, as an aside, is you basically take a tumor, you harvest the tumor, and whatever T cells are in that tumor that you resect, that's what you grow into the lab and give it back to the patient as a T cell therapy. So if this histotripsy is able to increase T cell activation and infiltration into an immune silent tumor, that potentially could lead to further immune therapy options for cholangio in conjunction with histo. We are in collaboration with Iovance, the TIL therapy company, about potentially priming these lesions with histotripsy and then start to develop T-cell therapy as a research endeavor together. So exciting things happening there. This is an ACC model that demonstrates on the bar graph here, when you're looking at the immune activation and lymphatic T-cell infiltration of control compared to radiation, compared to microwave ablation to histotripsy. And you can see a markedly elevated CD8 infiltration of the tumor microenvironment compared to the standard treatment that we have for cholangio currently. And this is another, basically driving on the same point that you have increased CD8 T cell activation and infiltration into this previously immune silent, immune resistant tumor. This is another study by Cliff Cho's, Fred Lee's lab in Wisconsin, and basically looking at the CD8 T cell infiltration in the flank ablated tumor and the contralateral flank, and showed that the contralateral flank also had increased T cell infiltration. And then you have the controlled lung, metastatic lung deposits compared to the abscopal effect of the lung from the treated with the histotripsy in the murine work. So this is really, in the murine model, this abscopal immune activation infiltration is a very promising evidence. So for me, just what I take away from it, it's non-invasive. So think about patients who've been resected multiple times, scar tissue, morbidity, 86, 89-year-olds. You can't really treat. They've exhausted chemotherapy, radiation. What options do they have? They tolerate histotripsy just fine. Not to mention that the patients go home the next day. Think about that for a second. That's amazing. Tumor debulking at the biliary hilar obstruction, which is, again, a common reason why patients stop their chemotherapy is due to biliary obstruction and sepsis. And tissue selectivity, the vessel and the bile duct being spared, is a very key hallmark of this technology that's found in nowhere else. Sharp boundaries, so when you can plane these tumors, you can literally go up as close as you want to the structures that you don't want to get near. And primarily what I mean by that is the colon or the duo in certain locations, because the bowel does not tolerate the histotripsy as well, so you do have to be quite careful about the bowel proximity. One way to get around that is instead of doing a supine subcostal window, you just do an intercostal lateral decubitus, and that really prevents any bowel injury. The immune modulation and mescopal potential, which is my very favorite part of it, and the part that the medical oncologist, until we told them this last bit of information, was very resistant. Time's up. Okay, sorry. Up until I told them this piece of information, they were very resistant for sending patients, because like, I don't want to send a patient to you for something that I don't know much about, and I have to hold my chemo for 2 months. And then when they found that, no, actually, you continue your chemo as is, and I just treat them the next week, and they go back to the following week like nothing happened, and they actually are been more open to it. We're the only area in Philadelphia area that have the machine and the technology. The surrounding hospitals have been very resistant to sending it, but ever since I educated them about this topic, the referrals are now flooding in from all the surrounding hospitals, and the med-oncs love it. So this is a patient of mine that I treated as an example. It's an observation. We have plenty more work to do to kind of expand the volume and evidence of this, but this is a really cool case. 75-year-old gentleman, retired physician assistant with cholangiocarcinoma, intrahepatic, with pulmonary metastases. He started on palliative adjunctive durva December till April, progressed, had some toxicity with the cisplatin, so just in gem durva from May to October, progressed, Capox October to January. And I saw him in December of last year as he came to see me through the Facebook interest group, which is the only way that people find me now. And he goes, I want to try this. And basically, he came to me basically as the med-onc was stopping the Capox and he was about to start the FOLFOX. And so we treat him in this in-between time frame of his chemotherapy. So this is pre-histo and post-histo 3 months later. But he had, so this just shows that, one, that the area of the cholangio is regressing. And so the acellular lysate goes through autophagy, and by 5 to 7 months, the area of the lysate is fully absorbed by the body, and that cavity is filled in by normal liver. So unlike microwave, you have a permanent scar in your liver for life. After histotripsy, after 7 to 9 months, that hole that you created is filled in with normal liver, and you don't see anything in it. But during that 7 to 9 months, that autophagy, you have 7 to 9 months of immune surveillance that can potentially generate an abscopal effect. For this gentleman, he had pulmonary mets, so pre-histotripsy, and then 3 months later, his tumor in his lungs are disappearing and regressing, as you see here. And it was notable that when I saw him for 30-day post-op, I was like, hey, how was that? He goes, hey, I know you sent me home that day, but man, I felt like I had a flu for a month. So he felt fevers, chills, achy, just felt run down for a month. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. It's not supposed to create all this. But in retrospect, his immune system was acting up during that time after the histotripsy, and that's why he was having characteristics of what my TIL patients have, which is the same immunologic side effects. And the notable thing is the histotripsy was in December. His peak was at 10,000 histotripsy, and now it's down to 300. So there is a dramatic response. Am I saying that this happens to every one of my patients? No. But has this ever happened to cholangio in the past? Not really. So this is, even though it's early experience, I think this is a very promising example of a patient that had a dramatic response with histotripsy on his third line of chemotherapy regimen. Another patient, 38-year-old ER resident, very sad. BRCA1 with PSC with diagnosed stage 4 cholangio, and she has ascites, she has mets in her lungs, ascites, peritoneal implants, and she's on her third-line palliative chemotherapy, about to start that, and she can't get durva because of her autoimmune side effect profile. She came to see us for histo. We obviously treated that solitary lesion in the liver, and that's clearly what that looks like 1 month post, of the post histotripsy lysate, well demarcated and shrinking. But it's also notable that her imaging also shows a decrease in her distant lymph node conglomerates that's been enlarged, and her CA19-9 is also decreasing. So this is after her 2 lines of therapy progress and histotripsy before her third line is starting. So it's promising. We can't prove it to you that this is all histotripsy. We haven't had the lysate, we haven't done the circulating tumor DNA, we haven't done the flow cytometry. We are in process of doing IRB submission to collect biosamples to study these 2 patients. But really the thing that we're going to continue to treat patients, and we'll continue to see numbers, and we do a peer-to-peer with all the providers around the country, and other providers are seeing the same thing happening. So it's not just me, it's happening all over the different sites. For me, that's to really push the envelope. So now we have this machine. So what I like to do is take advantage of the fact that a lot of these unresectable cancers, like the hyalocholangio and pancreatic cancer, have vessel encasement of critical structures that prevents it to be unresectable. So if you take advantage of the fact that the histotripsy can melt tumors around the vessels but not injure the vessels, could you preoperatively or intraoperatively, for locally advanced pancreatic cancer, treat the SMA portal vein with the histotripsy and immediately make incision and do the Whipple? The SMA encasement is what defines unresectability. Hyalocholangio, the vessel encasement and the extent of the disease, is what defines unresectability. So can you push the envelope and start incorporating histotripsy as not just an ablative therapy, but as a pre-operative, intraoperative therapy for the vascular encasement, and then continue on with the surgery? So this is what we're starting to do as an initiative. There's not a lot of people behind me at the hospital who wants to take on this aggressive approach, but like all things, I think it's worth it. So, yeah.
Come to a conclusion now, because we really want time for questions.
Yep.
And we are out
Last
of
slide.
time. Thank you so much.
So take-home point. So cholangio, as we talked about, lots and lots of smart people, way smarter than me in this room. We all play a role, and we all play our tool. I think histotripsy is another tool that we have for a treatment that's really difficult to treat. Am I saying that the histotripsy is the answer to everything? No, but it does play a role, taking advantage of those benefits and the things that it can overcome. And like all things, focus on what's important. So thank you, guys.